Okay. Before I introduce my guest who are already in studio, I have today I want us to talk about matters, politics and religion. What is the position of religion on our politics, and what's the role that politics, religion should play in politics, in as far as politics is concerned. Where we are today, we need to get it going. And that is why my guests are already in studio. Perhaps we get to introduce themselves. And for the first time on television, we have privilege to have the new Provost of the All Saints Cathedral, Reverend Canon Evance Omollo, on set with us here. Canon, welcome to Good Morning Kenya.
Thank you very much, Victor, and a very good morning to Kenyans watching.
Karibu sana. And with us here also is Sheikh Salim Charo, who is a member of the National Muslim and Leaders, NAMLEF, if I got it right.
Yes.
Karibu sana as well, Sheikh.
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Karibu sana. We'll be getting into that discussion very fast. But just to get your voices, starting with you, Sheikh, now that you're the last to speak. How is Kenya, generally?
I think from what we can see, and we've seen from the past weeks, the first, I don't know, the first instance where there were demonstrations, and currently now what we're experiencing, I don't think we are heading in the right direction. And it's a matter of concern. We really need to, see how we are going to save our country.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Canon, your take. Where are we as a nation?
I think, Victor and Kenyans watching, we are in, I would say in the strongest term possible, we are in a terrible state. Potentially in the ICU. And I think Kenya needs quick and immediate remedy, without which we are going to lose this country.
Yeah. Okay. Very well. Allow me to take you through the front page, only the front page of our local dailies on the Standard, Kenya on Edge. Based on what you gentlemen have said, Kenya on Edge, that is on the front page of the Standard newspaper. That is what we have here. And of course, the country is staring at a series of protests that will paralyze business, schools, and normal lives of Kenyans. From Wanjiku to the international community, all eyes are on the president and opposition leader to come with a solution, and fast. All right, that's on the front page of the Standard. What about the front page of the Star newspaper? Azimio tells of Envoys affirms 3-day protest. Azimio tells of Envoys affirms 3-day of protest. Opposition says that the diplomats have for months turned a blunt eye to police brutality. That is what is on the front page. Of course, we have U.S. Ambassador Meg Whitman, we have Netherlands Envoy, we have got UK Charge of Affairs, and of course, finally, German Ambassador, all of them raising their concern. And finally, on the front page of the Daily Nation, Azimio demos on as True's bid flops. Azimio demos on as bid flops. All-day primary and secondary schools in Nairobi, Mombasa, and finally, as at yesterday, Kisumu are ordered to close. That is the information that was sent out from the Ministry of Education. So according to the Azimio, they are pushing for dialogue. Diplomats are also, and even the religious leaders who are also here, and business leaders call for dialogue, peaceful protests. That is as per the Article 37. As per the working day, President Ruto set to launch 1.5 billion shillings water project in Kericho today. So that is a complete departure. It's a working day for the president. Man does not stop him from going about his business. And finally, security assurance, that is from the CS for Interior, urging those wishing to engage in protest to do so within the law. He also encouraged Kenyans to go about their businesses normally. That is on the front page of our local dailies. So, gentlemen, this is it. And I'm also glad that this newspaper has called on the religious leaders, the business community, as well as other leaders for a truce, but it's not coming. Canon, this is not something new to us. We've witnessed a situation before in 2002, 2007, and now we are here back again. Allow me to ask you this question. What is the position of the religious leaders on politics?
Thanks, Victor. I think it's pretty clear, and I know Sheikh will affirm this, that from the religious front, It's very simple and very clear. Our call for our national leaders is to tone down the political rhetoric, restrain from chest thumping, and seek to sit down and talk. There is nothing restraining the contending sides of the political divide to sit down and talk. Genuinely, we as religious leaders acknowledge that there are problems bedeviling this country, and those problems cannot be resolved through media exchanges. They cannot be resolved by press briefings. They cannot be resolved by manda manos. Those problems can be resolved when leaders sit down and engage and discuss and agree. And as religious leaders, we have been willing, through our superiors, to mediate and to birth a reconciliation.
Okay. One thing that is for sure, that religious leaders also play a very key role. Sheikh, we cannot underestimate the role religious leaders come to play in a situation like this. What is your position?
Okay, thank you very much. I think from what we've experienced in the past, the same politicians are also followers of a certain religion, and this means that they should listen to religious leaders, and because the call that we are making and the appeal that we are making to them is not for any personal gain, you know, but generally is to save the country. And I think I'll quote what the late Professor Saitoti said, that there come a time that a country will be more important than an individual. And just like Reverend mentioned, this is not the time to, you know, to just thumb and so on and so forth, because we've seen destruction of property, we've seen, you know, loss of lives, and it's high time they listen to the religious leaders, because when religious leaders talk, it's not their voices, that's the voice of God. Yeah.
Okay. It's been, even in the past, that at a time like this, we call on religious leaders. But why is it that politicians do not call on the religious leaders when things are calm? Why now? When the situation is now, we are moving on the edge, and this is a point now we are running to religious leaders. Does it mean that you're put as a point of last resort? Point of afterthought? Sheikh?
This is something I've also mentioned in one of my interviews in the past, because we should be, you know, on the table to discuss all these matters. But, you know, religious leaders have been, you know, left out, and, you know, when things get, when things go south, definitely that's when, you know, everyone is where the religious leaders. And from this point, I know there are efforts which are being made,
yes,
that they're trying to reach out to the national leaders, both national leaders, the retired and the, you know, the retired Prime Minister and the current President. And I think it's something, because it's something that we really need to be, you know, to put forward, because we are a religious country.
Yes.
You know, we are 98% religious, so we belong to a certain faith. And you know, when we get to a point where we don't want to listen to religious leaders, you know, it's like, you know, what we are trying to say is you don't want to listen to what God says, because religious leaders are interpreters of the God's word. Thank you.
And Canon, I'm so sure you've interacted with the politicians a lot. You would imagine the kind of call and whatever is running through the minds of Kenyans right now, that the sense of uncertainty that we have right now, we don't know whether it's going to continue for the next 3 days or the opposition is going to call it off tomorrow. But I'm trying to imagine, what do you really think runs through the head of the president and Raila Odinga? Because these are the two big boys as far as this is concerned. Yes.
Victor, when you look at the situation and you analyze these two protagonists, these two characters that you've mentioned, there are people that we know in other spaces and other circumstances. They have come out to be selfless, and they've demonstrated a sense of humanity. And without a doubt, I believe the president, where he sits, he knows that the country is headed the wrong direction. I know where Honorable Raila is now. He knows that what's going on in the country is wrong. The problem that I sense from where I sit is that there is a bit of selfishness that is intruding into their spaces with self-seeking politicians who push them to hold this firm stand without looking at the bigger picture.
So-called hardliners.
The hardliners who don't want to see, because politics is about interests, it's about power, it's about control of the economy, and there's a battalion of politicians around them, both around Raila and around His Excellency the President.
Yes.
And they want to further their interests. They will tell them, Mheshimiwa Rais, simama kidete, don't push back. We must teach this guy a lesson.
Yes.
On the other side, Raila's guys are telling him, Jacob, you must stand there and there. We must teach this guy a lesson.
Yeah.
And I think, Victor, for me, that's where the problem is. If we left those two to make the independent decisions without undue influence, tomorrow you'll see Ruto and Raila sitting down and saying, Bwana, sasa nini inafanyika hapa?
Yeah.
Let's agree to work together.
But at the end of the day, if we leave alone the personalities, I mean, Azimio is also raising a number of issues. You know, the cost of living. Some of them are can be attained immediately. Some of them are long-term. But I'm just trying to imagine, Sheikh, because at the end of the day, if we leave alone the two big boys, as I call them, there's some salient issues that should be addressed as a nation. And so how do we go about them without necessarily going to the streets?
Yeah, I think, you know, the issues that Azimio is raising are valid because we've experienced, you know, high cost of living.
Yes.
And it's only that it lacks a bit of consistency because you remember last year in November, you know, the call for demonstration was based on, you know, the Cherera 4. And then over the Nini, it was about the IBC, and then the Unga Nini came in, and now we are at the bipartisan, and now we are talking of Finance Act. So, you know, there is no consistency in it, but even though I may interpret as, you know, maybe they are taking advantage of the situation so that they may achieve their, you know, their personal interest, you know, as Reverend has mentioned, because politics is, you know, it's about interest. So because they want to, you know, to be seen that they are on the side of Kenyans, and for them to achieve, you know, their personal gain. So, but generally, what we have to, you know, to say is that number one, they should look at, you know, what is more important, what are the priorities first, because, you know, we cannot continue like this as a country, and when we're talking of the economic situation generally in the country, we are not only we are not the only ones or the only country that is facing the same. So all the countries we've seen, you know, Ukraine, Russia, you know, conflict, and so many other, you know, factors that are also contributing to, you know, to what we're experiencing. So I think it's high time that as politicians they be realistic, and you know, they try to address what can be addressed immediately, and you know, whatever is long term, at least we give it time, because when we talk of, for instance, food security, just the other day it has been raining, so maybe this month or later this month, people will be maybe harvesting. At least that will, you know, it's not something that you can, you know, have by going on the street. Yes. You know, and but generally they need to sit down. They need to bring their heads together. And we've seen the former Prime Minister have really sacrificed in the past, you know, and I believe they've also worked together with the president. So there are people who can sit down and talk about the priorities. The
president the other day said that I've worked with him, so nawajua vizuri sana.
Exactly. So they should, you know, stop all this, you know, you know, the hardline stances that they're having, and sit together for the sake of the country. And there's no one who will lose. Eventually, we experienced this in the former regime. You know, they sat down and the country went on, but we cannot afford to continue like this. If we have this demonstration in the next 3 days, the next week the whole of next week they call for demonstration, you know, and they'll paralyze, you know, the economy, and and nothing will be happening. Schools have already closed in Nairobi, you know, and other parts of the country. So what are we going to expect next? Exactly.
I'm trying to imagine, because anytime you sit in your leadership forums discussing matters of national importance, what are some of the priorities? Because, Canon, allow me to ask you this. What are some of the priorities from the religious sector point of view? The priorities. We attend, you know, our sermons Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or any other part of the week. But what are the priority from the religious point of view as far as the development of a nation is concerned?
Victor, you know, and I'll link this to what Sheikh has said, as mentioned. Apart from dispensing the spiritual message, which is the core mandate of the religious institutions and leaders, we equally have a huge role vested on us both by the Quran and the Bible to ensure that there is good governance and that the people are taken care of well. The welfare of the people is made a priority. And so when you're in a country where the big boys, as you call them, concentrate on what benefits them, and there's very little we are seeing that concerns the Wanjiku, then it becomes a huge burden and responsibility of the religious leaders. You've heard Archbishop Muheria speak about that we've lost our sense of humanity and the inability to connect with the grassroots and to see the plight of the poor and the people. And therefore, our call, particularly to the elected government, is to ensure that they deliver on their mandate. There is a manifesto, very clear manifesto from Kenya Kwanza, of how to grow the economy, of how to spur industrial growth, of how to create jobs, and XYZ. What we are seeing is just cutting on taxation. Heavy, heavy, heavy and unreasonable taxation. And in my opinion, that is the undoing of the president currently. And unfortunately, that has made him play into the hands of Raila and just push Raila into a warm part of the swimming pool that Raila thrives on that. Because the Finance Act is affecting every nerve of this country. And from what I sense, it's not an Azimio thing. It affects all corners of the country. If you look at the demonstrations that were passed, all corners of the country, people are demonstrating because of the high cost of living, the unreasonable taxation. You cannot start running a country by taxing the people. Deliver on small successes. Let's see jobs created. Let's see the economy stabilized. Let's see things happening and the rule of law being established. Then we should be able to, as religious leaders, then to support the president and to call on the leader of opposition to say, please allow the president space to work. So, number one, that I think is the undoing of the president.
Okay, let's take a break. I want us to come back and talk about the aspect of religion and governance. And for a very long time, I mean, quite often than not, you've been called out when things go south. Religious leaders, mko wapi, here and there. So I want us to talk about that when we come back, because it's quite important so that we put some sense on it, even as we start the third day, the 3 days of Manabano, as opposition is calling it. Stay with us. All right, let's take a break. We'll be right back with more after this. Perfect. Welcome back. And we're still having that discussion on matters to do with religion and politics. What is the connection between religion and politics? It's time for us to have a conversation as a nation. The Mandamanos, what they call it, or the protest starts today for the next 3 days. So, Sheikh, religion and governance, are they twins? Can they be separated?
They cannot be separated because, there's a way that we are influenced by religion, and it's a way of life. And also politics also play a role when it comes to how, we live. It's also a way of life. Because good governance, it means, remember what Mzee Moi said. Unaona, siasa mzuri, maisha mazuri. Na siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya. So, that's how, they are related now. And there's no way tunaweza tukajiita you are a Muslim or you are a Christian. Na you don't, follow the rule of law, hizi sheria tumeziweka and stuff. So generally they are connected, and what's important is that we should follow the rule of law generally, and serve the people. Thank you. Yeah.
Canon, religion and governance. Where do they meet?
I think, interestingly, that's a very interesting question, because you look at the Constitution. At the outset of the Constitution, it separates the two, but does not disengage them completely. In practice, what the clause of Kenya being a secular state simply means that allow the state to run independently and allow the religious groupings to operate separately. But in terms of implementation, it means, as Sheikh has mentioned, that there is a point in which religion connects with governance. In this sense, they ought to remain neutral, non-partisan, not taking sides of any side of the political divide, so that they can play the role of what we call a watchdog, holding the government accountable. Because you read the Quran, you read the Bible, you read other religious books, they are replete with the concern for the people. And politics drives the welfare of the people. Religion holds accountable those who are mandated with the responsibility of ensuring the welfare of the people. And therefore, when they do wrong, religious groupings must call them out. To that extent, then they connect at that level. Remain neutral, but hold them accountable as watchdogs.
But are religious leaders neutral? This is just but a question to
I think that's one of the challenges we've faced as a country.
Yes.
Yeah, but we cannot also say that we are not neutral, because looking at, when we talk generally of the, we are 98%, religious. So, and irrespective of which religion that you practice, but also, the same people who are, politicians are also followers of a certain or a particular religion, and there's no way one of my congregants will vie for and they'll come seeking our blessings, and at the end of the day, we'll need to support them and come behind them, and this is where in some instances we are seen not to be neutral, and because we've been seen with certain politicians, and we've been seen with leaders, so it portrays that we are aligned to a particular a particular section of the politics. So, but generally we need to portray, and we need to be seen, because we also, as religious leaders, we vote. So I believe during the election, the Reverend voted for a certain for one party, and that doesn't mean that he's not neutral. But when it comes to national issues, this is where we are supposed to be seen not favoring one side. We should come, be in the middle and mediate on behalf of the Kenyans, and look at what are the interests of Kenyans, what are the interests, what are the priorities, and that's the role that religion plays when it comes to politics.
So where do you draw the line between politics and governance, Canon? Because it seems that it would be a very hard nut to crack when you talk of politics and religion. So where do we draw the line? It must be a very thin one.
I think for me, my colleague has explained it well.
Yes.
That on national issues, on matters that touch on the fabric of the nation, we must remain neutral. I have my personal political choices.
And that's it.
I have my preferences politically.
Yes.
But I cannot play those ones on the media here or in public gallery. Those remain private, and I hold them privately. Like, for example, today, assuming President Ruto and I are friends, and as a leader of religion, I am seen with the president praying for him. I'm part of his praying team, always at State House every now and again. But then on the other hand, demonstrations are happening, and I have a national mandate to play the mediator role. How am I going to talk to Raila? He's seen me all over drinking tea in State House and driving intercessory meetings and prayers in State House. Will I have the audacity and even the moral authority to go talk to Raila? I cannot. And that is what Sheikh is saying. On those national issues, remain neutral, that we can be conciliators, be able to bring these two parties on the table without swinging on one side.
And is it working? Because from what we see, the president is quite, so to speak, religious. So how does he, move from his position as the head of state, come to the religious leaders, and now to the main person of the Mwananchi, so that all these people are brought in the same bracket? Let me start with you, Canon.
Rick, I think the president has done well, and I like his religious inclinations. And I think one time my predecessor, Provost Salim, did mention that, State House is a national institution. And practice your religion, but don't turn State House into a national religious preferred setting for one particular religion. Practice your religion. Have your prayer room, have your whatever, but at the national level.
Yes.
You are the president of the Muslims, the Hindus, the Jews. You're president of the traditionalists, the Christians. Everybody retained that at the national level.
Okay, Sheikh.
Yeah, also his, symbol of national unity, and that's what he should also portray. And if they are, to have, such, what we call prayers at the State House, I think they should be interreligious, and we have such a body where, all faiths are brought in, and, at least they can, participate and feel part and parcel that, we are also contributing to, to national duties. Yeah.
At the end of the day, we've had such situations in the past where you as religious leaders, you're always called out when things go south. Sometimes the way you put it, that you have to be neutral. Why is it that church or the religion or the religious institution sometimes find themselves slipping away from the public and finding their corner somewhere, and at the end of the day they get subdued by certain political formations to an extent that they forget about their national mandate and your calling as an institution? Sheikh, you've been called out several times.
Yes, we've been called. I remember 2007, religious leaders were called. I remember even last year,
yes,
before the elections, the tensions were very high. And, but, as religious leaders, we managed, to subdue the tension. We went through the elections. We went through, the Supreme Court, and we just came out as as victorious, as Kenyans at the end of the day. So, but we are now back here, and things are not going the way maybe we thought, and it's also there's also the same call that we need religious leaders. So I think it's very important also that Kenyans do recognize that there are people who are neutral, who will come and save this country. We've done it before, and I think it's also high time, because what I'm really trying to call for is that we failed to let's say because we are not seeing it from the president to play his role as a symbol of national unity, where it's not about losing, but when we fail to follow the laws that we made, we don't follow the constitution, when we get to a point where we don't want to follow the laws, and I think the last resort is what God says, and God speaks through religion and and religious leaders. So when you get to a point we also not, or we fail to listen to the religious leaders, this also shows the extent of I don't know whether I call it anarchy, or I don't know what I'll call it, but it shows where we will be heading as a country, because once we fail to follow the laws that we have, and we fail to follow what religious leaders or religion says, we won't have any other result. So I think it's very important for as a country to listen, and our role is not that we have our own personal interests or as religious leaders, but is to bring them together. Whoever is going to lead, whether they're going to shake their hands, as long as the country is going to to continue from where it stopped.
Okay.
Victor, just one thing.
Go ahead.
Just to add to what Chika said, I think the political class need to understand that religious leaders will not always be singing their tunes. You look at the holy books, the prophets never spoke things that made the kings dance. They would speak things that would make them very uncomfortable. The scenario you see in this country today is that politicians, including even the head of state, want religious groupings that say things that suit them, that look so nice to them. And that is why you'll see a section of religious groupings are pushed and are very close and cozy around power, but then another section is pushed to the end. We must recognize that the religious leaders will speak the voice of God. And when they speak the voice, when they speak for the people, and they speak the voice of God. Politicians must understand that these are divine utterances, and they're speaking on behalf of the people and God. Listen. Sometimes you may not even be comfortable. Please listen. Seek to listen. And I want to urge the President, at this point in time, the numerous repeated voices from the religious groupings are a demonstration that God is speaking. His Excellency, please listen to the voice of God.
Because when you talk about, you correctly put it, Canon, but look at it holistically. You know, in 2007, the way Sheikh has put it, it degenerated into something that nobody ever expected for us, and we are still in the process of recovering from that. Anytime you're in this situation, we stop and say, gentlemen, this is where we came from. Some of our people are still in the IDP camps, years on end. But you can also say that religious leaders also fail to some extent.
I agree.
Yeah.
I wouldn't deny that. And I think that is the danger and the terrible road that sometimes we follow. And because they're human, you know, people who follow power, they want to follow money, they want to follow influence, you know, this promise of appointments here and there. And it's so easy to be swayed by that. And that's why, for us, even to our colleagues in the religious space.
Has that changed?
It hasn't changed as much. A little bit it has changed, but you can see a section, and please let's not bundle the church or the Muslims. It's just a section. When a section does, there's a huge terrain of the religious space that is doing what is right. And as Sheikh did mention, even as we speak, there is shuttle diplomacy going on, and probably I want to believe these things will not even go on. There's a lot that is happening. So there are good efforts being made by religious groupings. But when a section messes up, then it makes the whole picture be seen to be really, really dirty.
That must be worrying you, gentlemen, because when it spoils, like the other day when you had the Shakahola, and by the way, the death toll in Shakahola has crossed 400 mark. That's quite sad, as at yesterday. Sheikh, when assume that you're also put together in a room. We have got the president, okay, putting an example, in a room, and you are on a round table in State House and told, okay, gentlemen, this is it. Today is 19th, we have to save this situation. And you're given the microphone to speak to the nation. What would you tell the religious, the political class from your point of stand? That, you know what, this Kenya has to stand. What would you tell them?
I think I'll just tell them what I've said before, and I think these words we should, should live, or the legacy of late Professor Saitoti should live on, meaning that, a country is more important than individual. Yes.
A country bigger than an individual.
Yeah.
That I don't think they would pick that clearly. They would really oppose that. But Canon, what would you tell them?
I'll look at Raila in the face and tell him, Your Excellency, Honorable Raila, call off the demonstrations forthwith without conditions and seek alternative means. And I'll tell the President, please step down from the ivory tower of non-connection with the grassroots. Listen to the voice of the people, sit down and talk to the opposition.
Again, assume that you're also given a position in politics as religious leaders, you're brought on board. As it is right now, it's completely separate. So how does the religion completely complement the running of governance of this country? Canon?
For me, one is to influence the values that are embedded in a practice of governance. And if I'm in that space, then it would be to ensure that we completely ensure transparency in the management of affairs of this country. We have a lot of dirty things happening in government. To ensure accountability in management of resources. The taxes we collect them from the people to ensure the welfare of the people and prudent running of this country. But there is massive corruption and looting. You look at the auditor's report, Auditor General's report, massive looting in parastatals, in government agencies, in the executive, and my role would be to ask, let's stem this corruption, because even this taxation that the president is bringing, we have enough resources that if you sealed the loopholes of corruption and wastage, we should be able to run this country and create more jobs. So really, governance, religious leaders and influence is to ensure prudent management of resources, good governance, obedience to the law. You hear the executive and members of parliament are bent on increasing their salaries every now and again. Zero concern to Wanjiku. Zero concern to Wanjiku. And I think part of our role is to hold those guys accountable and tell them, please, tone down.
Yes, you have to call them out whenever things go south. Sheikh, what would be your point?
I think generally is, to adhere to the rule of law and generally ensure that Chapter 6 of the Constitution is, well practiced, and because we don't apply it, the way it should be. So I think that's very important, and to support what Canon has said. And I think also, when we talk of corruption, there's, we are also in a very bad state, and because I think if you listen to the government, why have they, taxing or, increasing the taxes? They'll tell you there are debts. And just the other day we had that, there are no debts, debts are cleared. We are not even certain, whether we had debts or, whether, so we are just at crossroads. So I think what Canon has said is something that is very important. And also once the demonstration dust settles, I think that's the way to go.
Again, whatever is happening, we have got some statistics from human rights organizations that up to this particular point, 23 people have so far died. Last evening, in one of our bulletins, a young man around 23 was shot in the head. A bullet entered this side and exit on the other side. I mean, the use of excessive force, that has been called out by the human rights activists, even you as religious leaders. You had your press briefings yesterday, different organizations also called out to the police on the use of excessive force, but sometimes it's quite inevitable. Canon.
Yeah, I think sometimes you sympathize with the police as well.
Yes.
But on the other hand, you feel that the police is also not acting professionally. Article 244 of the Constitution calls on the National Police Service to ensure that policing is practiced with professionalism, with restraint. You wonder, whereas I strongly condemn this act of looting and wanton destruction of property by the demonstrators, and I think on that front I seriously fault the organizers of the demonstrations, because it's within their mandate to tame the demonstrators, to ensure it's peaceful. But when it flips and it goes violent, you break into a supermarket and carry a whole flat screen. I mean, that's property of somebody. Police are left with very limited choices. However, I'd want to ask the National Police Service and the IG to restrain the officers. Even in the face of such happenings, please, let's not use live bullets. We have rubber bullets, and they're collecting a lot of taxes. Why are we not buying rubber bullets? You can't tell us that there shouldn't be rubber bullets. And in proper practicing of policing, why shoot at the head? Why not maim somebody? Then we are able to save life and then hold them accountable later. Not justifying killing, not justifying a destruction of property, but all these things should be done.
There should be some balance. There
should be some parameters around them. Really, and that's what we're calling the IG for, to really restrain the officers. There are evidences, even of videos on the expressway, and marked Subarus shooting people, literally killing people. I mean, that's not what you want. Why are we killing people? They're doing wrong, yes, but you can maim them, arrest them, and then charge them in a court of law.
Sheikh, does this worry you? Because a majority of people who are killed, I mean, it's from a very small age bracket, 19, 23, 28, thereabout, some young people. These are generations lost within a flash. So how do we change the mindset of the youth? Yes, the politicians are also doing their bit. You know, anytime they go to the maandamanos or the political rallies, the first word is vijana oye. And then wazee will come later on and wamama later on. But the first one is vijana hoye. So how do we bring the vijana hoye to a different clarion call that says that, you know what, vijana? It's politics, yes, but it doesn't have to be personal, because these politicians, they don't take politics personal. Sheikh.
I think that's so much worrying, because when we have, these are future generation. Now, when we get to a point, where, police don't, okay, generally, we can take from two aspects, because number one, they are energetic, and secondly, okay, to some extent, we cannot generalize, but some of them,
yes,
the youth, are the ones who loot and, mug people and so on and so forth. But that does not, justify for the police to use force. And, since the demonstration started, because I remember one of the instances at the Kibra when when there was the church and the mosque was there, and we had 3 bodies were to be buried on the same day, and also it was seen, as one of the things that will trigger, what will happen and stuff, and that went unreported, and then we've seen the use of force, where the police, just come shooting helter-skelter, and and I've seen the other week on the last demonstration, police vehicles just going and just shooting tear gas at people randomly, and even you would hear them telling you their demonstration, why are you working? Something that is seen, and I didn't get the registration, but the police post is written. It's something that has been seen, and they're just shooting at a skelter. So what does this mean? But coming back to the question of the youth, I think it's up to the demonstration organizers also to urge their followers to, in fact, to apply the Public Order Act,
yes,
to apply it, because we cannot.
But you also agree with me that you also have a very important role as religious leaders to bring this youth back to the rail.
Yes, we do have, we can reach out for our followers,
yes,
to our followers, but, not every youth goes to a church, not every youth goes to a mosque, so, and, where we can...
Chef, we have different forums that can be done. We have different forums like this one.
So generally, yes, so it's up to the organizers, and also, and we also appeal to the youth not to, because my point was, we cannot solve a problem by causing another problem, because yes, we are complaining of high cost of living, but by destroying other people's property, are we helping the economy, or we are making the economy work?
Article 37.
So, exactly.
But Victor, what Sheikh is bringing out, which I think we also understand from your question, these youth, majority of them are jobless. The age bracket you're defining, they're jobless and they're struggling. They take advantage of the demonstrations to destroy things or to make their own money, to make their own living. The other day on Bagathi Way, in front of Memorial Hospital, the Defense Forces Memorial Hospital, mugging people literally in broad daylight. I think there's an economy issue there. Of course, there is also the value issue, the values they espouse. And that's why for us, our call really is to create an economy that thrives, economy that can create jobs in the informal sectors, enable these youth to make a living so that we can reduce these things. Does not actually, that lack of a living does not justify them going to the streets, but I think it's a double-edged sword. Government has a role. Our roles as leaders, religious leaders, we have a role, but politicians who are organizing these things have a role. Why call Vijana Oye?
Yes.
And you've seen another clip where they're given 1,000 shilling everybody. 1,000 shillings with a panga. 1,000 shillings with a panga. They thrive on that. 1,000 is too much for them for a day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Let me start with you. Your final remarks. Sheikh, on the front page of the Standard newspaper, this is what it is. Kenya on edge. Kenya on edge. Your camera, please just talk to the Kenyans out there, whichever language you'd want, talk to them.
Nafikiri la muhimu, nafikiri ni lugha ambayo Wakenya wote wataipata, and it's also official. Generally, la muhimu ni kuwa tuna jukumu la kuokoa taifa letu, na hatutasuluhisha matatizo yaliyoko kwa kusababisha matatizo mengine. Asante.
Asante. Reverend Canon.
Two things. One, to the political leaders, especially to His Excellency Raila Odinga, please find it in your heart today to call off unconditionally the demonstrations, that tomorrow we will not see this thing repeat again. Restrain your troops, restrain your foot soldiers, please, to the President. There's a lot of shuttle diplomacy happening now from the diplomats and from the religious leaders. Kindly heed. Sit down with the opposition leader. Let us talk. And finally, Kenyans, restrain yourself from destroying property. Please don't go out to the streets to be part of destruction that is planned today.
Thank you. On that note, Canon, you were just installed the other day as the keeper of All Saints Cathedral. Congratulations. What's the work for you right now? How does it feel sitting on that seat?
Thanks, Victor.
A big shoe to fit in, probably, I must say.
Thanks, Victor. Well, yeah, big, but I think I come with my shoes.
Yes.
But thank you. We're clarifying the vision, beginning now to break down actions into what we need to do, and this is part of what we're called to do. So with God's help, definitely, we will keep to the expectations of God and the people.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, and congratulations once again. You have your work cut out to steer the flock. All right. That is Reverend Canon Evance Omollo, who is the Provost of All Saints Cathedral, as well as Sheikh Salim Charo, member of NAMLEF, that is National Muslim Leaders Forum. Today we're just talking about matters to do with politics, as well as the position of politics and governance and even religious leaders. Today is a very tough day even for us as journalists outside here on how we are going to balance the story so that it can be balanced. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Asante sana. Okay, so let's take a break and we come back. We want to also talk about, as we talk about politics, let's talk about education, because that is the equalizer. And up next is the PS in the Principal Secretary in the State Department for TVET, as well as Gideon Murenga, who is a TVET National Coordinator, GIZ Kenya. We want to talk about issues to the TVET and the dual TVET institutions and learning in the country. That is coming up shortly after this break. Stay with us.